We may or may not have visitors. Thanks very much, Ted. It's just Ted and I here. Greetings from the University of Michigan Law School. I think, is there anything that you wanted to add to the agenda, Ted?
Nope.
No?
Go ahead, talk about whatever you're talking about.
Okay, good. So, well, as you can see here, what I'd like to do before we launch into what we're proposing, and what I'll do is I'm going to maximize this, you know, where we're at. Occasionally I'll fetch out to that if necessary, but what we're looking for is part of the broader strategy to not only engage in the nouns and verbs of standards development, but also to install a structural and permanent and enduring way to get our industry's interest in there, and there's many different ways we can do it. So obviously we've done it with universities engagement. We feel we did it with the Simon Institute. We're going to do it with IEEE and ASME, but we still have some low-hanging fruit here, and that's what I wanted to show you. If I can, this is the current version of the NEC, and much like the ICC suite, and I can show you what those look like, but right now we're looking at the NEC. They have model language for state, local, county, emergency management districts. However it's sliced at the local level, they give them model language, and this is actually under the purview of the committee that I have a vote on. So what you'll see here is something reasonably similar to what the ICC does. Maybe I'll get a chance to get to the ICC and show you what they do, which is to make sure that the first part of their documents always install language, model language for adoption into local law. So it's not a very long section. So they give some basic statements about what a structure of a some definitions. Obviously they say who's who. For example, these are terms that we're very familiar with: chief electrical inspector. What's important also, I think, is to remember that the NEC has been developed by the National Fire Protection Association, and that the NEC is the NFPA's largest moneymaker by far, but you'll tend not to see a lot of electrical engineering influence it. The most of it happens in the NEC. So it is remarkable that they actually identify who the electrical inspector is, and their concern, obviously, as a safety organization, is for safety. There's not as much of an emphasis or even the influence of economic considerations, which is where we get into it. The language here for new and existing installations, this can be a battleground also. Sometimes you'll see in the ICC or other state codes a threshold, a criteria for when an entire building has to be renovated or brought up to speed. It's a little bit easier to do as an architect than I think as an electrical engineer. Have you had any experience on that cusp between the 49% renovation and 51% renovation, Ted?
All too often.
So do you want any more color on that? Do you suppose it's easier to make those kind of statements in terms of square footage versus in an electrical system?
No, because usually the AHJ is pretty black and white, and as soon as anything that he's looking at hits the threshold that he's targeting, why, your goose is cooked.
So
was that adequately diplomatic?
That's right. We are being recorded here, so we have to be careful. Now, the distinction I wanted to draw was one where it's relatively easy to get a building and renovate it, and to say on a 100,000 square foot building that we just renovated 51,000 square feet of it, and then we're going to bring everything up to code. That would include all systems, including electrical. When you have an electrical system, it's not quite as easy, as you know. Obviously, it goes to all different parts of the building. And so one of the ideas we could project through here, and it can go either direction, is what was the criteria for what could be grandfathered in an electrical installation, and what has to be all brought up to code. Right now, I think the unit is used as square footage. It's not as easy to do with an electrical system that's spread out and its tentacles all over the building. So I thought this is kind of where you would kind of assert that criteria. One of the ideas I've been thinking about is trying to get them think a little harder about whether this percentage renovation concept applies to all facilities. So, and I think I might have learned this from you, if we assume that certain classrooms, business occupancies, areas of assembly in our industry, maybe the one-size-fits-all 50% criteria isn't appropriate or isn't economically optimal for us. So we could say that in the case of, just to start an argument, that when a classroom building is 60%, when 60% of the square footage is to be renovated, then you bring everything up to speed so that you have that other 10%. But in other facilities that might be of a certain age, that's another issue. You could scale according to the age of the facility. That maybe a one-size-fits-all criteria for bringing the whole installation up to speed could be made occupancy specific. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I'd say in general you're going to have a hard time claiming that essentially a supermajority of the project, or renovation of a supermajority of the portion of the facility is required before you have to comply with the updated code. I think you'll be lucky to, I think there are some jurisdictions where the law says that if it's down around 25%, you've got to bring that whole area up to the new code, and you're just
asking for trouble. Of course. Suppose we stayed away from numbers and that we were to add language here that we would call it an item D, to try to capture the idea that the criteria may be informed by occupancy class and risk, and leave it at that, which then sets in motion a line of thinking in localities that says, well, maybe we do want to make, they don't say a number here, right? We don't see a number, but we see that number projected in the state building codes. But at least here, this is an example of where we could get occupancy specific language to make local jurisdictions think in a more granular way about the degree to which you need to bring a whole building up to speed. You always look like a bad guy when you suggest that you don't have to do as much work, because after all, how could you possibly be against safety? But I do think that there are a number of cases where we overdo it with renovations, and I think you alluded to that when we started this line of discussion, when you said all too often you've been at that crash point. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. So in any case, so this is a target area that I think in the electrical code, and also in the IBC, that would be one of the ideas that we'd be putting in front of the 2018 IBC to get them to think in terms of the criteria for renovation being occupancy and even age specific. So, steering away from numbers. Okay, so they go through all this to rip through this. What I'm going to get to is now, and you'll see the, again, emphasis on safety, funded local conformity assessment people have to deal with. But down here now, the creation of the electrical board. Now, this could be easily creation of a mechanical board, plumbing board, barrier-free accessibility board, blah, 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 blah. But our point is that you don't see the party that has to pay for all these wonderful intentions in this mix. You see all the usual partisans, but you don't see the person picking up the tab. And that,
of course not. You don't want someone who's paying for it to be involved in decisions of risk.
That's right. So then we can just fast forward for the benefit of our audience. It looks like we've got another attendee coming in. So we'll wait until I see their I see their name pop up. So let me then fast forward to the markup that's on our agenda. So anyway, all this goes through the normal stuff you would see in a local building code or a state building code. And it's not much. It's similar. They all steal from each other to some degree or another. And again, they're all oriented towards safety. This is a little bit different here. You don't see this elsewhere, but in general. So our markup would consist of making a couple statements on this, and I could easily get myself appointed to the subgroup that would deal with all, let's put it this way, a task group. I simply go to the chairman and I say, hey Kevin, I've got about 15 proposals that I want to evaluate that deal with the administrative rules for enforcing the electrical code. Could you give me a balanced group of materially affected stakeholders, and let's flail away at this thing. And I may not be able to get any more votes, but I might be able to get the discussion steer the discussion in a fashion that would at least not be against us. And that was the case with the aluminum wiring issue, by the way. The reason I claim credit for the aluminum wiring issue is that the task group's chairman was ready to summarily execute that as an editorial error. So that's a side issue. But the pathology of a code deliberation like the NEC, especially one so large and complicated, is that you have to break it off into task groups. So those task group leaders have a lot to do with keeping the time at the site down, but also what ideas flow upward. So I have an advantage here because I can influence the outcome of this to a larger degree than somebody that's not the chairman or have a vote. So, and that is really the substance of what we're driving at here, other than to let you know that we are going to be projecting this. We'll be using the same idea with the state of Michigan. Let me get to that project. We're doing the same thing with the state of Michigan. Let's see. Okay, this is a little bit different. Again, we're going to the state administrative board and we're making proposals similar to this is how the state is laid out. What we'd like to see is a representative from these facility paying stakeholders to balance off, to provide balance to the incumbents. And also there's another part of this where we're trying to get it changed so that right now the state of Michigan says any work over $100 has to have a journeyman do it, and that journeyman's work has to be inspected and paid for by a state electrical inspector. We just think that that's excessive. Obviously, this is where normally antagonistic contractors and inspectors have an agreement. They both can get paid at a very low level. So that's the substance of what we're driving at. Again, it falls along the theme of trying to assert the user-owner interest, distinguishing that interest from the user-enforcer in a public organization. So that's it. Anything to add or subtract from that?
No, looks good. I wish you the best of luck.
Well, we are meeting with well, we have to climb our way up to the governor's office of regulatory reinvention. There's a lot of there's a whole archaeology of administrative enterprises within enterprises within enterprises, and the governor here, assuming he gets reelected, we'll work with any governor, because what we think this will apply to any political party, that we think our ideas have some merit. So we're going to march them through whatever administrative process is necessary and see what the outcome is. It hasn't been done in, let's see, it hasn't been done since is it the early 70s or the 1972. We have not revisited our state construction code since 1972, and we think a few things have changed since.
You think, huh?
So
I can't believe it hasn't changed since '72. You're living in a stone age, Mike.
So I'm hoping I could charm you into giving me some names, because this this particular issue, what we number as 14.1, we actually had done some early work on Indiana. I'm not so sure if I didn't get this from you. I started poking
I
around.
gave it to you. I think it was $15,000 or something like that for Indiana before you need any kind of a PE involved in a project.
Oh, okay. Well, that'll be important, because the public sector, that nobody likes to move first, right? So they'll always look for, except for California, they'll look for precedents around in adjoining or adjacent states. So this originally started as something we would do with MAPA, but given we don't have much of a structure for the MAPA Standards Council, we can at least proceed with our colleagues here. And my hope is that maybe we can, when we get to the point where the governor says, well, what's Indiana doing? And we'll tell him. Or what's Illinois doing? We'll tell him, blah, 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 blah. And we'll say, well, we don't want to do anything too far out in front of Indiana. Well, maybe we do want to be too far in front of Indiana. It can go either way. I need to get the facts in front of them and some decent ideas, and we think this is a good way to drive value into our balance sheets.
Well, again, I wish you luck.
Okay, then. This may be a short call, which is just fine with me. It'll be recorded. We'll post it. Now, next week I'll be doing, what am I doing next week? Oh, I know. I was trying to get you to help me with this one. I forgot what it was.
If everything goes as planned for me next week, I will be unavailable. It's not that I plan to become unavailable, but it's the only choice that I have.
Okay. All right.
So maybe you better cancel it.
Well, I've effectively canceled it, because I want kids, I still got kids in school, and we want to take them out to our usual pilgrimage to Georgian Bay. So I'll take a long weekend there, but I will do an on-demand video presentation, and Larry Spielvogel's offered to help us with this one. This will preface the meeting we'll be having. Joe Vermanzi will be coming out to the, let's see if I can show you this. We're American National Standards Institute is going to be our guest. And if I can show you our, we've been trying to work diligently, and let's see if I can find the website. Give me one last chance, and you'll see it. It's not publicly available. It's worth you seeing, because it's going to be a high impact 3 days here. And he's a So we'll be hosting them here for the MyAPA conference. I'd like to have it. Webcast, at least his part. So we'll be bringing the deans of the different schools in, letting them hear the story, the public policy school, the engine school, the business school, the law school, the urban planning. All of them, of course, are affected by infrastructure standards, and Joe will be speaking to that. Part of it will be with MyAPA, and the other part will be with the academic group here. So you should know about that, and this is where we'll be, again, driving more of these ideas and getting them vetted before we march it through legislation.
All right, good luck.
Yeah. Okay, so if you'd like, you're welcome to listen in as Larry and I prepare that this topic here. And
Okay.
it won't be much longer than a half an hour, but it's something a little bit off. It's a more policy-oriented that might be of interest, and it's certainly something we need to lay a foundation of understanding of. So, all right, so I guess I'll let you go. If you have any other ideas for the updates, we put out a number of NEC proposals today, but that's a different conference. So if I'll let you know when we'll be recording that on-demand video sometime between now and next Tuesday, I think, and you're welcome to key into that one. Otherwise,
All right. Thank you, Mike.
yeah, okay, take care, Ted. Bye-bye.
Yeah.